Hey everyone, and welcome to my Procreate demo for the piece I call Die Job. This is the piece. This is how it is when it's complete. I thought I'd show it nice and whole before I actually go into it. And this was the original sketch. I actually found this drawing when I was cleaning out the basement when we just moved here to Germany. And it's an old pink hair girl that actually didn't make it into the book. In fact, I'm not sure she's even in the page where I show the stuff that's thrown out. So I wanted to color her finally because I've always liked her, and just time didn't allow her to get into that book. So as you saw at the very beginning there, it's just a photo. That's all I start with. It's not like a clean scan, so then I have to clean it up a little bit with levels and desaturating it and erasing away and stuff. And now I'm just sort of going into the usual flatting process. Somebody in one of the previous videos pointed out that my coloring style starts with a lot of sort of traditional comic book coloring techniques, and that's 100% true. I just never really thought about it. That was what I wanted to do originally as a career, was being comic books, and I've done a little bit of comic book coloring for sure, but that's sort of why you see this exact method in my work where I'm flatting everything first, and I never basically like go to straight paints. It's always this to get my shapes first. Part of it's because of the comic book background, or the desire to be in comic books background, and another part of it is because I'm also very shape driven, and I like if it's a comfort zone for me to have those shapes anchored before I start actually painting. So you can see here the whole thing's been flatted, and now I'm working on the hair. There's a lot of really tedious little things here, so you might not be seeing a lot of change in the video as you're watching this part. This is probably the part that just doesn't stand out that much in terms of work, especially because the values are so subtle, but you can see I'm working on the sort of top section of the hair right now. Now obviously this piece is called Die Job because she doesn't have pink hair. That's the joke. And so I wanted to sort of thematically just speak to that by having, a more muted hair color this time, and then go with like a super bright background that's really saturated, similar to the pink hair from the book, but not so on the nose that I actually made the background pink. I wasn't going to do that. But anyways, so now we're getting towards the tail end of wrapping up the hair. You can see I've got some sort of midtones going on there, and then I'll put in like a really bright shine in a second right there. So I sort of, with a big fuzzy brush, lay that in all fat and globby, and then go back in with a tighter fuzzy brush and sort of cut out some of those edges to give the shine a little bit more style. Now I've moved on to the skin. I'm going to actually break down some of my technique in a minute here, but first I wanted to show you this is the first layer, which was the flat, and then the second layer, which is sort of the next value up, the next color up. And so in general, I'm doing what I normally do, which is where I take a sort of harsher brush and that's got harder edges, and I'm putting down the main color, and then I'm going back in with a much softer brush to sort of pull back. You can see it on the bridge of the nose here, or the top of the nose there, and then you can see as I'm putting in this area right around the mouth, you can sort of see me go in and put it in very hard and very heavy, and then I come back through with a softer brush and I sort of knock that back. You're going to see more examples of that in a minute. I'm going to sort of call it out. The other thing that I'm going to call out in this one is exactly what I'm doing with all of my layers here. You can see that there are times where it just looks like I'm painting all on one layer, and then you'll see me erase away, and it's like it's a non-destructive erase where it doesn't touch sort of something else that I've already done, and that's just because they're all on multiple layers. When I paint something like this, the end result has a decent amount of layers, but in the middle of it, each of these sort of values, for instance in the skin, are comprised of many layers at once, and then I collapse all of those eventually once I'm done with sort of that section. In Photoshop, it's a lot easier to control because you can have as many layers as you want. It's really just up to your computer as to whether or not you can support them, but in Procreate there are limitations on the number of layers depending on the size of your canvas, and when you import an image in like this, I believe it's like 40 or 41 layers that you're allowed to have. So here you can see that this level of the skin is basically wrapped up. I'm finishing the ear right there. And then here you can see this is how many layers that I actually used in order to build all of those sections. So that's one set. There's the other set. There's a lot of layers here. In fact, here they are side by side, just so that you can see exactly how many layers there were when I was in the middle of it. Then when I was done with this section, I collapse them all into that, and there you can see what my layer setup is very cleanly. It's skin 1, skin 2, skin 3, and that's all we've got right now on as far as her skin goes. So now we'll continue to move into the next layer. So you can imagine that that exact same pattern is what I'm doing here. It's just on the next level up. Now, I don't necessarily do like a billion layers like that all the time. Like on something like the eye, it would be a lot quicker. But on something like the skin, where it can be very complex and there's lots of topology, that's basically what I do in order to ensure I can control that soft and hard. So here you can see also I'm laying in very harsh paint again, and so the point of this is we take a shape that's basically like this, where it looks like a face mask, and then we're softening it to something more like this. So now you can see in the next step that process actually play out. So this is me repeating the previous footage. You can see I go in and it's just very harsh, and it's more just sectioning out, like this is the area that I want to have this value, and then very quickly I go in with an eraser and see, you can see on her cheek there, on her jawline, it's softened up, and that was me basically erasing back. That exact pattern is what I'm doing across the entire image. Everything from the hair to the skin to the eyes, everything is like that. You go in relatively hard and then you pull back with an eraser. The actual brush that I think I use for a lot of this is the standard like first one on the painting section. Again, I'm not very big into custom brushes, particularly in Procreate. I have my own in Photoshop, but I don't really use a ton of custom brushes because I just don't find them necessary for the type of work that I do. So here I'm doing the darkest layer now. I usually work from sort of a darker mid-tone all the way up to high, and then I usually jump to like a very low tone. That's what this is, and then I jump back up to sort of my brightest tone. It's so that I can just, in my head, it's the way that I can best organize my values by sort of staying in the sort of middle range and then going to the extremes from there. So now you can see here, I don't remember when I do it, but she's got that really hard crease next to her nose. I was debating whether or not I was going to keep that, and then you'll see me go in and just slightly patch it just to soften it a bit. Some of what you just saw there was just adding the tan line and then adding sort of a white layer that's set to add at like 5% just to brighten her skin up. I find that in general that sort of adds this sort of glowy aspect that skin has. I also went in and did the blush and the lips and the eyeshadow. These are all very standard things that I do in almost all my pieces, so you can go back and see other versions of that. Now I'm adding in that little lip of eyelid on the bottom. That's what that just was, and now I'm doing the actual eye itself. I've painted irises many different ways. I just sort of wanted to zoom in here to show the way that I'm doing it on this one. You can see that's sort of a method that I used to use a while ago if you followed my work, and I just sort of wanted to go back and do something closer to it just because it seemed like fun. I also wanted to zoom in here because I do a lot of the reflections and light work in here, and I know a lot of you have been interested in that in the past. I actually detail it in the Pink Hair Girl book, one of the methods in which I do that, and so you can see it here close up. And so here you can see some of the reflections and how I lay them down in various ways. I'm going to actually duplicate. I slow down the footage even more here because it goes really quick, and then I duplicate it so you can watch exactly how I'm building it here. So a lot of people have asked for various zoom ins, so I'm trying to make sure that I do that a little bit more. Here we're going to zoom out for a second, zoom over to the ear, where you can see me building that plug that she has. It's pretty simple. I just duplicate the shape and add a gradient and accent the rim and stuff. Pop out for a couple of body details, and then zoom back in, and here's where I'm actually doing the metal of the earrings. I could have really pushed the metal and made it a little bit more metally, but to be honest, I just sort of went quick because there's such a small element on the piece. I didn't really feel like I needed to go much more than that. So now here I am doing the rim light. She's in a super blue-green seafoamy world, so I just wanted to do this really rich rim light and not mess around with diluting it or making it bright white or anything like that. And really, after painting it, I just sort of add a little bit of a vignette, a little bit of a blur, and the whole thing is done. Very, very straightforward if you've seen my other videos. Hopefully there was some cool extra stuff in this one. Thank you for watching, and please hit subscribe and like if you enjoyed it. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.